So what is Fuckup next?
Thank you so much, and thank you so much to my fellow fucker-uppers. I particularly appreciated the last presentation. We should all be blessed with such fuck-ups that are like small fuck-ups and great achievements. So I'm very proud of you. And thank you so much to Vache and Heyarpi for inviting me. And my view is, like, when it's time to sing your own praises and don't look back and own it and never apologize. And when it's time to own up to your fuck-ups, go down, go deep, accept your fuck-ups. Because we live in this crazy world where there is a false economy of success and a false economy of happiness. And it feels so normal that that's the case. Because what do? Every morning we open up Facebook, we look on our Instagram, we look on social media, and you kind of go through. It's like, wow, this person is really happy in this cool place, and this person is really happy in that place, and oh my God, look at this delicious dinner. And nobody is putting on Facebook, nobody is putting on their social media, I'm feeling really depressed. I'm feeling really down. My life is going to shit. You don't put that. As a matter of fact, if you put that on your social media, you actually scare people because nobody wants to hear it. And so because we're all just people with highs and lows, and so we all just kind of go through our lives with just this little feeling, like, God, I'm feeling kind of shitty today. Maybe I'm the only person on earth who's feeling shitty, because you look at Facebook, everybody is ecstatic, and you don't internalize this message that the most depressed person on earth probably smiles once a day. Maybe it's just a muscle reflex, and it's like, oh my God, this is the moment. And that's when you do your selfie. That's when you jump in the air or do your little thing, and you put it on social media. And then that other person who's feeling shitty is thinking, God, I'm the only person who's feeling like crap today, because look at this happy guy who's like the depressed person who's jumping in the air in their 1 second of happiness. So it is my personal view that the only way we can achieve happiness, true happiness, the only way we can achieve fulfillment in life is to recognize that life isn't just one thing. That if we think of life as just one thing, and whether it's high or low or whatever, like we become a prisoner of that thing, where life isn't. Life is many, many things. And it's almost a tyranny of positiveness. And certainly for those of us who are optimistic Americans, it's probably even more. I mean, I'm Jewish and you guys are Armenians, and maybe going through some kind of genocide allows you to kind of own that shitty things happen to people. But there's a lot of pressure, and I think that many of us, myself included, can have heroic senses of ourselves. And that doesn't mean they're wrong. They can often be right. But we're much more than our heroic sense of ourselves. And so for me, what I want to talk about in kind of owning my fuck up, the clash that I experienced, it was extremely, extremely painful, between my heroic self, and what follows the heroic self. So since I was a little kid, growing up, I'm originally from Kansas City, which is in central United States in the state of Missouri. I always knew that I was going to go back to Missouri at some point, and I was going to run for office, starting probably with Congress, and then I imagined Senate and beyond after that. And so that was my mission. I was waiting for the time to be right. And then after 9/11, I directed, this is the self-promotion part, I directed a national task force on emergency preparedness. And when I was doing it, after the report came out, I was briefing many members of the United States Congress, one of whom was my congresswoman from Kansas City. And interacting with her, I realized that she was kind of losing her bearings, and she was very erratic. Her staff secretly took me aside when I visited her. They knew that I was thinking about running for office. They said, please run against our boss. If you run against our boss, we've all decided we're going to give you checks because we don't think that she's suitable for Congress. And so I thought, all right, well, this is my chance. This is this moment. And I went home, and I went home from Washington, where I was then living, to Kansas City. I opened my office, and I started just moving very quickly. And I broke all the fundraising records for this district. I was very, very careful not to say anything negative about this woman, who I'd actually known my whole life, because I actually wanted her in the race. And things were going really, really well. I was making huge inroads. And then there were all kinds of twists and turns along the way when it became a little more clear in Kansas City that she was having these problems. Another much tougher candidate entered the race, and actually he was the one who pushed her out. And then there was a race between me and this other guy. And here I was. This was really something I'd wanted to do for my whole life. And when I was out doing it, I had this epiphany moment that this was what I was meant to do. That it was going into the community, talking to people, understanding what were the challenges that people were facing, and saying, well, how can we bring together those challenges and translate them into policy prescriptions of things that we can fight for. And when you're running this kind of campaign, especially in the United States, what you need to do is you're building different kinds of coalitions. So one is the coalition of people who you have done a transaction with. And that transaction essentially is, if you trust me to be your champion, I will fight to be your champion. That's the transaction. So at that time, there was a big issue, for example, on gay marriage, which moved very rapidly after that. And I was the only federal candidate in Missouri who was for gay marriage. There were a lot of those kinds of issues. And when you build that coalition, it's like, I imagine when you're the candidate, it's like you're pulling a sled. And so all the people who are supporting you, they're kind of riding this sled that you're in some ways pulling. And then you have to raise so much money. So you raise money from basically everybody you've ever met in your life, and everyone they've ever met, and everyone they've ever met. And they're all in the sled. And you're kind of pulling the sled. And so for me, for this year in the race, I was saying, well, I can't let go because I can't stop pushing. And so for a year, I worked all day and all night, just to the level of exhaustion, really every day. And I went from just this little thing to having thousands and thousands of people and volunteers and parades and all of these kinds of things. But it was a tough race. And the other candidate was the former mayor and a leading minister and the leader of the African American community. There were all kinds of dynamics that affected the race. But I knew that this was my path. I knew that all I had to do was take this first step, and then all of the steps beyond it would open up. But I had to win. And so all day and all night, I pushed. And being in this kind of campaign, it's not like you're out campaigning like I was saying you shouldn't do on Facebook. You're not saying, hey, I'm some kind of flawed person. I have my doubts, but I think I could probably be pretty good at this job if you elect me. That's not how you run for office. You say, I am your champion. If you elect me, I will fight with all of my might, and whatever it takes, we're going to win. And we're going to start by winning this race. And then the election happened. And I was there, and I was the heroic me. And I knew that we can't always be our heroic me, but when you're running for office, that is the you. There is not space for non-heroic you in your public life. It's just like when you have a startup. Like when people are looking to you for leadership, you can't show that kind of doubt. It's the role that you have taken on. And so heroic me on election night was watching the votes come in. And at first it looked pretty good, and then the votes started shifting and shifting and shifting. And by later in the night, it was clear that I had lost. And I went, and there were all of my supporters, and it was in this big, very big open bar in Kansas City, and all the TV cameras were there. And I went and I gave my talk, and I talked about fighting for what you believe in and fighting in the right way to do the right thing. And there were a lot of my supporters, and they were crying. And in a way, it felt like the loss had been a victory, that there were all of these people whose lives had changed. It felt like they had changed as a result of the campaign. So I felt really good about it. And I came out of it thinking, well, I didn't win, and it was very painful, but it was a victory in a way. And then there was a presidential race, and I was involved in that for a month or two. And then my candidate in that race, John Kerry, lost the presidential race. And I was still on this ride of heroic me, fighting and slaying the dragons. And now comes to the beginning of the real story that I've come here to tell. Because this heroic me started to feel these pangs. This heroic me who had just spent an entire year from morning till night saying, everybody follow me, we're charging forward, we're going in that direction, we're going to win, there's nothing that's going to get in our way. This heroic me who had even lost the campaign, lost the election, and still declared victory because I changed the terms so that I could have, which was a real story of this is what it's really about. Started to feel these feelings that I'd never felt before. These feelings of heaviness, of doubt, of missing this energy that I normally use in my life, that I see as my superpower. I could feel that energy going away, that my natural smile was just being pulled down by gravity, that my energy, every morning when I wake up, it's like I wake up and it's my first instinct is, fuck yeah, it's the day. But I was feeling, oh shit, it's the day. I had felt a little better when I'm asleep. And it was this thing that was coming over me, this sadness. I didn't have a name for it. Everybody on earth knows what the name is, but it wasn't part of my personal lexicon. My personal lexicon was the lexicon of heroism, of personal heroism, of being the champion. That's the role that I'd played in my family, among my friends, in everything that I had ever done personally and professionally. And all of a sudden, I was this guy who was facing the day thinking, oh shit, it's another day. What am I going to do? But because I was the heroic me person, and because my strategy for challenges was I'm going to conquer that challenge, I said, well, you're not going to let this happen. You are you. You're heroic you. Would heroic you let yourself feel this feeling? No. Would heroic you let yourself just lay in your bed for a day or lay in bed and watch movies all day? That's what other people would do. What heroic you would do is go to war with this feeling. And that's what I did. First, I went to war. I mean, I'm already an ultramarathoner, but I went to war with sports. And then my brother was actually with me. We were in our family home in Colorado. And he said, you know, you seem kind of down. Why don't I write you a prescription for these drugs? And I said, well, what are these? And it just seemed like like taking some kind of Advil or an aspirin or something like that. And I just attacked this feeling. And it took me a long time to realize that the thing that I was attacking was not the feeling. The thing that I was attacking was me. Because I so could not accept that this feeling of down was part of me. I had externalized it and thought that this is this other thing, and I'm going to war with this other thing. And it was such a painful process to realize that when heroic me attacked this feeling, it was heroic me attacking a part of real me. And it took 2 years to working through this feeling to recognize that we're all, and I'll personalize it, that I am both of those things. That if I couldn't accept that I was a person with highs and lows that could charge out of the gates, but also accept that there might be some time when I just felt like laying in bed or watching television or doing these things that I kind of never do, that I wasn't more as heroic me, that I was more when I accepted all of me. And what this led me toward, which I think too is kind of like now what's become a central insight of my life, and that is my recognition, extremely hard-won recognition, that life is like a sine curve, and it's just up and down and up and down. And when you are up, you have to know that the down is coming, because the down is coming because we are humans, and that's who we are. It's how we function. And that's what keeps us from mania. It's actually healthy to recognize that ups don't go up forever, that there's a down eventually following the up. But the inverse is also true, that when you are down, no matter how down you are, as long as you stay in the game, the up is coming. And you don't need to fight it. I mean, sometimes you do need to fight it, but you don't need to not accept yourself. You don't need to not accept your own feelings, because it's having all of those feelings, I learned, is what makes me a person more worthy of the ups and able to recognize the ups in relation to the down. And so for me, it's like the same point, that these fuck-ups can be extremely, extremely painful. But in accepting them and in owning them, we really do become more. Thank you. Yes, hey RP. The question is, what are the measurements of highs and lows? And I really don't know, because I think that for everybody, it's different. Everybody exists within a range of your highs and lows. And I'm sure there are moments in your life, like, Henry, you just had a child. It's probably a high above your normal range of happiness. And then everybody, we have lows that are lower than what we thought was our bottom range. So when you're in your normal range, it's pretty easy to recognize, well, this is just life. Some days I feel better, some days I feel worse. But when you're out of your range, it's a totally new territory, like you were feeling, Armin, with your divorce. And those are the times when it's really hard to internalize that I'm down but it's not going to last forever because you don't know it. If you knew it because it was in your range, you would say, I've been here before. And that's this hardest thing. And it's almost that talking about this and these kinds of topics, it's a way of inoculating ourselves so that when these lows come, or even when these super highs come, we're ready for them because we've thought about it, even though these are things we maybe had never before experienced.
You described a really nice self-realization process, which you kind of skipped the part when you actually realized that this is a fight against your own self and maybe your ego, which you didn't mention again. I mean, I've read a lot of different ways that people have discovered. It was books, spiritual experiences, psychedelics maybe, I don't know. I'd be interested in knowing, like, is there something that happened like at that moment when you actually came to the realization?
I wish I could say it was a sudden realization, but it was actually after more than a year of fighting against this feeling that I had this slow, it wasn't just one moment. I've not done magic mushrooms, but it seemed like I should have just done magic mushrooms on the first day and I wouldn't even be here. But it wasn't like there was like one moment. It was like, aha, and then I ran up the stairs. It was, I spent a year, no. But I spent a year like trying different vectors of attack on this thing. And it was failure. It was just this grinding, slow failure of feeling like, well, I'm attacking this thing that I think is the enemy. So why am I not feeling better? And that was this thing. It was like this glide path, and it wasn't any realistic. It was just like a little bit, a little hint. And then a friend of mine I was talking to, and she was a movie producer, and she had just come back from this intense 6-month shoot in a foreign country. And the producer, she was like every little detail. It was all out for 6 months. And then she said, I came back, I was so morally and spiritually exhausted, and I just couldn't get out of bed. And you know what I did? I laid in bed for 5 days, and I just watched movies. And at the end of 5 days, I started to feel better. And I thought, wow, that's a thing? Like, and it was just like, sometimes these realizations are exactly like 2 feet in front of your face. But for the reasons that I've explained, you can't even see them. You can't see an inch in front of your face. And so I think it was time, and it was just failure, total, absolute failure of the path I was on.
Oh, that's me.
Oh, okay, sorry, you're in the dark, okay. Yeah.
So do you have any tips for the people who think they're losers, or they have losers mindset?
Yeah, you're special. I'm just kidding. It's really hard because I just think that people have different attitudes and views of themselves. We're all so influenced by our early childhood experiences. But I think that just having a little perspective, because I'm sure there are some people in life who are horrible people and torturing others and killing small animals, and maybe those people are losers. But most people, actually, everybody has a combination of good stuff and bad stuff. And everybody knows so much more about themselves than they know about other people. And so some people can be really harsh on themselves and then have very sanguine views of other people. And I think that it's just that process of perspective, of acceptance, and of recognizing that for all of us, we're all works in progress. And I think everybody has these moments of doubt, but we all see our own doubts. It's harder to see other people's doubts. And so there are a lot of things that people can do. But even something like this, that's why it's so valuable. To tell you the truth, I've never spoken about this in public. This is the first time ever. But I just think that this kind of process is really valuable because I think that if we did more of it and if we were just brutally honest, we would recognize that we're all kind of going through some variant of the same stuff. And we're all our harshest critics. And if we just work a little bit, nothing ever has to be perfect, but I think we just do a little more work every day towards understanding ourselves better. And if somebody feels they're a loser, just whatever your criteria is that you're critical of, be a little less of that every day. Be a little more accepting. Be a little more loving toward others. And little by little, we grow. Yeah, Mariana. The good thing, I mean, it's the best of times and it's the worst of times, to quote somebody else. Kim Kardashian is speaking at WCIT tomorrow. At 11. And I'm really worried about social media for the reasons that I've described. It creates, this false economy of fake happiness, where everybody has this fake happiness. 2, there's our attention. I really liked what you said about putting away the phone and just going and sitting in a chair and thinking. There is a battle for our attention. And I was with somebody just the other day on Friday in New York. We met for coffee, and he was saying he had a friend who worked at Google. And they had done something, they had used like 100 million people's experience, data, to figure out how perfectly to do those little notices that you get, like you have a message or whatever. And they had, like, the font, the color, the sound, everything was taken from millions of trials. And they had basically discovered they could make this combination of sight and sound and light. They would make it almost impossible for you not to pick up your phone, almost impossible for you not want to have your phone upside down. And so there is a war for our attention. And as you said, we're just giving it away. But every little bit of that attention is a little bit of your peace, of your soul, of your identity, and we're just giving it away for nothing. And I don't even want to be paid for it. I just don't want to be part of it. And so on one hand, we have access to connectivity, and to be able to come to a place like this is a great gift. To be able to gather in person is a great gift. And then we have this craziness of this social media that is really pulling us away from ourselves into living as fake representations of ourselves. And then there's all this fake spirituality that's kind of coming at us, so we learn like the language of spirituality without the essence of it. And maybe that we can have this peace by coming back, and that's what I love about ancient societies like Armenia, that regaining some of the things that we've lost. I mean, I'm a futurist, and so I think a lot about the futurist, but I'm also a pastist, that there's a lot of great stuff in Armenian culture, in Jewish culture, in all cultures. And if we lose that great stuff as we race towards this really exciting future, there will be no reason to go where we're going. And maybe the answer to your question, as imperfect as it is that we all need to recognize that we're actors, that we have all these things that are coming at us, but we have to define our space, define our relationships, invest in the kind of life that you want to lead, because if we aren't conscious in that way, we'll just drift, and we won't even know we're drifting. But we'll drift to a place that's not authentic and feel lost.
Thank you, Jamie. Your story is probably my favorite one from today. So
well, these guys were great too.
No, yeah, sure, but
yeah, these guys fucked up at fucking up.
No, every single story, of course, was interesting, but yours kind of inspired me. So I'm wondering, what's your favorite fuck-up story? Something that didn't happen to you personally, but something that inspired you and you would like to share?
I mean, of somebody else's fuck-up?
Yeah.
Oh, that's like what you were saying about your person who didn't want to work at late at night. I'm just kidding. I'm sorry. You're my foil today. I don't mean it. She said, somebody, that's like a license. Like, kind of tell a story about somebody else's fuck up and what you learned from that. It's like an ultimate Schadenfreude. I have to think more. Well, do you have one?
I don't know. I didn't think about it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. This is my fault.
Yeah,
I'm such a failure. I'm such a loser. I can't think of somebody else's fuck up.
Okay.
Do you have one?
Yeah.
Oh, please tell us.
As I told, it's yours. It's your story.
Oh, well, that's that really is. I'm a successful fucker-upper. That's my greatest. All right, thank you so much. Is okay to done? No, not thank you. There's another fuck up. Yeah.
On the night of election, when you said you were sitting there and watching the numbers going up and then it fell down, I want to know at the time when you realized you were losing, what was the first thing you thought about? When was the point when you said, I fucked up? And what was the thing that came in mind that you fucked up? And do you have a plan on fixing that on your next run?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So, I'm such an innate optimist that just whenever there's some kind of fact pattern around me, I'll tell myself the positive story. And it's my greatest asset and it's my greatest weakness. And when you're running this kind of campaign, it always feels like you're winning. Because I spent millions of dollars on ads saying how great this heroic version of me was, and then, all these videos of you kind of helping little kids and stories from your life, and your old teachers saying you were their favorite student ever, and all these kinds of things. And wherever you go, you're not doing like some kind of objective poll of the people. Wherever you go, the people are coming around saying, oh my God, you're so amazing. This is so great. And so you feel like you're winning. But then there's like numbers. And the numbers don't lie. And so there's zero, exactly. And so when those numbers started coming in, like my innate optimism was less and less of a match for the facts. And so going back, I certainly have thought a lot about, well, could I have done things differently in the campaign? And I'm sure there are some things. It was a very, very steep climb. I would have defeated the first opponent. The second opponent was extremely, extremely difficult, and then there were other factors. The electorate had changed just for that one election in ways that really hurt me. So there were things I could have done differently. I don't know if I had done it differently, I would have won. But I would say, I'll switch your question of what's the fuck up. But another lesson that I learned is we all have targets. And we all have targets that we want to hit that are really, really, really important to us. Whether it's being successful with a startup or creating a new field or whatever, and they're really important. And if you're like an archer and you're firing at your target, and let's say the first time you miss, the second time you miss, third time you miss, maybe, just maybe, in some cases, you're standing too far away from the target. So move closer to the target or move the target closer to you. And so for me, being able to pivot, and this was, even today, talking about this, when I watch the Democratic candidates debating on television, like I have this feeling like I should be there, and I feel like I could do better than many of them, I feel. I could be wrong, but that's what I feel. But I also have this target and this life with all of its rewards. And so I think sometimes it's okay, it's actually an act of self-love to move the target someplace else. And maybe that's the question of some people feeling like a loser. Maybe you're feeling like someone's feeling like a loser against some target, and maybe that's not even the right target for you. You're measuring yourself with the wrong metric. And so, if everybody in the state of Missouri gets Ebola and there's like one guy left and it's me and I survived because I live in New York, and they call me and say, hey, we need you to come back and be the governor because you're the last guy left, I would say, great, I'll be right there. But that's not the life that I'm leading now. So I just think that sometimes fuck-ups are just fuck-ups. Sometimes in retrospect, they're pivots that allow us to pivot from something that maybe you really wanted, maybe you tried really hard to get, and it just, for whatever reason, it didn't work. Maybe it's your failure, maybe it's the world. We just can't control all the variables. But maybe that's the time when you move the target, you pivot. Because then there's another goal, there's another something else, and we all have many different paths. I mean, I know with your divorce, I mean, it must be really hard to say, well, this was this path. I have a friend of mine, I was just with him in New York. He was perfectly happily married, and his wife's father gave him a call and said, hey, let's meet for lunch. And said, oh yeah, like as they ordered, just, oh yeah, your wife wants to get a divorce, we'll come pick up the stuff on Tuesday. And this guy was like, holy shit, like that was my life. And now it's something else. And that, it's so painful, but sometimes we have to pivot. And if we pivot, and if we learn whatever lessons there are, and maybe do psilocybin or whatever, that pivot can lead us to some other place. And maybe that's a place that we never imagined. But there's a lot of happiness in so many different directions, and sometimes we need to take a little turn to find it in some other place than where we thought. I tell the story now, there's like a level of sadness. And who doesn't want to be the heroic version of themselves, especially when it's like a momentum machine. And now I'm on this momentum machine again with my writing. Because my book, my most recent book just came out, and I've been on this crazy whirlwind. And I can feel it. Like I can feel this machine. My podcast interviews have been downloaded 10 million times over the last 4 months. And all these things are happening, and there's so much momentum, and there's so much energy. But because I had this experience, I am now much more grounded, because I recognize there is the public me. And frankly, I love the public me. If I could just occupy safely public me and write books and give talks and travel to wonderful places like this, and which frankly is what my life is, that would be great. But I always need to remember that this heroic me it's not fake me, it's just one piece of me. And if that gets separated from everything else, from the me and I was just talking about this with my girlfriend, that is vulnerable and needy and at times raw and messy and doesn't always think in full paragraphs. Like that is also a part of me. And to have real intimacy with myself and with my girlfriend and with my friends, the only path is to do it as all of me. Because if my, whatever it is, heroic me or avatar, whatever you want to call it, has a relation with somebody else's idealized version of themselves, it's perfectly fine. But that's not honesty, that's not intimacy, that's not realness. And that, to me, is the path of happiness. It's connection. I mean, even this with Fuckup Nights, like you could do all this online. You could just post videos and you could sit at home and watch videos. There's something about being a human being, being raw, being vulnerable, like all of these things that we are. And yet every day, we put on our armor. And whether our armor is our suits, our makeup, our posture, they're all things that we have to do it. It's how we function. But we always need to maintain that connectivity. Maybe, Mariana, it's part of the answer to your thing. that we can't be, that we have kind of who we are at one time, and then once a year we go to 10-day Vipassana, and that's the real me. The real me is the person meditating for 10 days, and this other person is an act for the rest of my life. We need to find that integration. It is hard, because it's so much easier for all of us to play a role. That's, I think, the gift. That's the gift of these failures, which aren't even failures, is that they knock us out of our narratives of ourselves. They knock us out of our roles. And if we really are open, then we can use that opportunity to become more and to become stronger. And it's not stronger in that role, that heroic self role. It's stronger as an entire human. And that's where, in my view, real strength lies. Thank you.